Do you know the story of a noble woman whose life was shattered by loss, yet whose wounded heart became a refuge for countless souls? She was a devoted wife, a loving mother, and a young widow forced to walk through grief, family conflict, and painful separation. Yet through every cross, she discovered that holiness does not depend on comfort, but on surrendering each moment to the love of God. This is the story of Saint Jane Frances de Chantal, the courageous mother who founded the Order of the Visitation. Before beginning, write Amen in the comments if you desire greater trust in Divine Providence. Like the video, subscribe, and join us as we continue discovering the extraordinary lives of the saints. Chapter 1. A childhood formed by faith and loss. Jane Frances Frémyot was born on the 28th of January 1572 in Dijon, the capital of Burgundy. France was then divided by religious conflict, political ambition, and violence between Catholics and Protestants. Into this troubled world came a child whose life would reveal that God can form extraordinary holiness through both privilege and suffering. Her father, Benigne Frémyot, was president of the Parliament of Burgundy. He was respected for his integrity, intelligence, and firm Catholic faith. Though he held an influential position, he taught his children that earthly honor meant little without virtue. From him, Jane learned courage, responsibility, and fidelity to the Church. Her first great sorrow came before she could understand it. When Jane was only 18 months old, her mother died. The warmth of maternal care disappeared from her childhood, leaving a wound that would quietly accompany her for years. Her older sister and other relatives helped raise her, surrounding her with affection and discipline. The Frémyot household valued education as well as faith. Jane learned reading, music, household management, courtesy, and the responsibilities expected of a noble woman. Yet her formation was never limited to social refinement. She was taught to pray, to attend Mass faithfully, and to recognize Christ in those who were poor or forgotten. Even as a child, Jane showed a strong attachment to the Catholic faith. During a time when religious arguments divided families and cities, she remained deeply devoted to the teachings of the Church. Her reverence during Mass and her love for the Blessed Sacrament revealed a heart already drawn toward the mystery of God. Those around her noticed not only her intelligence but also her kindness. Jane treated servants with respect and showed compassion toward those in need. She possessed a lively and determined nature, yet beneath that strength was a heart capable of great tenderness. These qualities would later shape her as a wife, mother, foundress, and spiritual guide. Her childhood was therefore marked by both blessing and absence. She knew the security of a noble family, but also the pain of losing a mother. Through these early experiences, God was quietly preparing her to understand grief, responsibility, and compassion. The foundations of her future vocation were already being laid within the ordinary life of her home. Chapter 2. A marriage filled with love and service. In 1592, at the age of 20, Jane married Christophe de Rabutin, Baron de Chantal. Their union brought together two respected families, but it soon became much more than a noble arrangement. Jane and Christophe developed a sincere affection rooted in loyalty, mutual respect, and a shared desire to build a Christian home. Jane entered married life with generosity and practical wisdom. She restored order to the household, managed the estate carefully, and treated the servants with fairness. Christophe came to trust her judgment deeply. Their home gradually became a place where discipline was joined with warmth, and where faith shaped both family decisions and daily responsibilities. Their marriage was blessed with 6 children, though only 4 survived infancy. Jane knew both the joy of motherhood and the sorrow of losing children at a young age. She devoted herself to those who remained, guiding their education, correcting them patiently, and teaching them to love God through prayer and charity. Her concern extended far beyond her own family. Jane regularly visited the sick and distributed food, clothing, and medicine to the poor. She did not regard charity as an occasional obligation of the wealthy. For her, every suffering person was a neighbor entrusted to her by Christ and deserving of personal attention. During times of famine, she opened the granaries of the estate to those who were hungry. Some feared that the family's provisions would be exhausted, but Jane refused to turn away people in need. She trusted that Divine Providence would protect the household while they shared what they had with the suffering. Life at the Château de Beaubilly was active and joyful. Jane joined her husband in welcoming guests, managing the lands, and caring for those who depended upon them. Prayer remained at the center of the household. Family members and servants gathered for worship, learning that love of God could not be separated from justice and kindness. These years revealed that Jane's first school of holiness was not a convent, but her home. Through marriage, motherhood, administration, and service, she learned to offer ordinary duties to God. She had no reason to imagine how suddenly this peaceful life would end, or how deeply her faith would soon be tested. Chapter 3. A Fatal Accident and a Widow's Surrender. In 1601, tragedy entered the Chantal household without warning. During a hunting expedition, Christophe was accidentally shot by a friend. The wound proved fatal, and after several painful days, he died. Jane was only 29 years old, left alone with 4 young children and responsibilities she had never expected to carry by herself. Her grief was overwhelming. The man with whom she had shared love, faith, and family life was suddenly gone. For months, sorrow affected both her body and spirit. Yet even in her anguish, Jane refused to abandon God. She clung to prayer when consolation seemed absent and trusted him when she could no longer understand his will. Christophe forgave the man responsible for the accident before he died. Jane desired to do the same, but forgiveness did not come easily. Whenever she saw him, the memory of her husband's suffering returned. She prayed for the grace to overcome resentment until, slowly, mercy became stronger than the wound within her heart. Her surrender to God became more complete. Before the crucifix, she entrusted herself and her children to the Heavenly Father. The Lord would now be the protector of her household and the source of her strength. Her widowhood did not remove her duties, but transformed them into a deeper act of faith. Practical difficulties soon followed. Jane had to manage estates, protect her children's interests, and navigate the demands of relatives. Her father-in-law required her to move with the children into his household, where she endured humiliation, tension, and an atmosphere far different from the peaceful home she had known. Jane remained there for the sake of her children's inheritance. She responded to harshness with patience and cared even for those who treated her unfairly. Instead of allowing bitterness to govern her, she turned suffering into service. This hidden endurance became one of the most heroic periods of her spiritual life. Amid these trials, Jane began to sense a desire for complete dedication to God. She did not yet know what form this calling would take, and her responsibilities as a mother remained sacred. Still, beneath the grief of widowhood, God was awakening a new vocation that would eventually bless the entire church. Chapter 4. The Bishop Who Recognized Her Soul. In 1604, Jane traveled to Dijon to visit her father and attend the Lenten sermons. The preacher was Francis de Sales, Bishop of Geneva, already admired for his holiness and gentle wisdom. As Jane listened, she felt that his words addressed the deepest struggles of her heart with remarkable clarity and compassion. Francis did not preach a spirituality of fear. He spoke of God as a loving Father and taught that holiness was possible in every state of life. His message brought peace to Jane, who had struggled with severe spiritual practices, anxiety, and the desire to prove her devotion through excessive sacrifice. Jane sought a private conversation with the bishop. During their meeting, both recognized something providential. Francis understood that she possessed unusual courage, generosity, and spiritual depth. Jane sensed that God had finally sent the guide for whom she had prayed during the lonely years following her husband's death. Their relationship became one of the great spiritual friendships in Catholic history. Francis guided her firmly but gently, helping her abandon scrupulosity and trust more deeply in divine providence. He taught her that perfection consisted not in doing many extraordinary things, but in lovingly fulfilling the duties God placed before her. Their letters revealed profound mutual respect. Jane spoke openly about her doubts, suffering, family obligations, and desire for religious life. Francis answered with wisdom, patience, and practical advice. He never encouraged her to neglect her children, but helped her discern how maternal responsibility and a deeper vocation might eventually be reconciled. Francis also carried within his heart a vision for a new religious community. It would welcome widows, older women, and those whose health prevented them from entering austere convents. Instead of severe bodily penances, its members would pursue holiness through humility, gentleness, prayer, and loving service. As Jane listened to this vision, she recognized the calling God had been preparing within her. The losses of her life, her experience as a wife and mother, and her compassion for human weakness all seemed to converge. A meeting that began with a Lenten sermon was becoming the beginning of a new work for the Church. Chapter 5. The Birth of the Visitation Order. After years of prayer and discernment, Jane became free to begin the mission entrusted to her. In 1610, she traveled to Annecy with several companions. Under the guidance of Francis de Sales, they established the first community of the Order of the Visitation of Holy Mary in a modest house near the city. The name recalled the Blessed Virgin Mary's visit to her cousin Elizabeth. Like Mary, the sisters were to carry Christ quietly into the lives of others. The original vision included visiting the sick and poor, combining contemplation with works of mercy. Their service would flow from prayer and return continually to prayer. The community welcomed women often rejected by stricter orders. Widows, older candidates, and those of delicate health could offer themselves fully to God without being crushed by extreme physical austerities. Francis and Jane insisted that love, not bodily strength, was the true measure of a religious vocation. The words of Christ became central to their spirituality. "Learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart." The sisters sought to imitate the hidden virtues of Mary through simplicity, patience, mutual charity, and obedience. Their convent was to be a school of the heart rather than a place of fear. Jane served as the first superior. She did not lead from a distance, but shared the sisters' work, prayer, and sacrifices. She corrected faults when necessary, yet avoided unnecessary severity. Her own experiences of motherhood shaped her leadership, allowing her to combine tenderness with firmness and compassion with spiritual discipline. The early years required courage. The sisters had few resources and faced uncertainty about the future, yet their joy attracted others. Women arrived seeking a life of prayer rooted in trust rather than anxiety. The small house in Annecy gradually became a spiritual home for souls longing to belong entirely to Christ. What began with only a few women would soon spread throughout France and beyond. Jane had entered a new kind of motherhood. She remained a mother to her children, but now became a spiritual mother to an expanding religious family dedicated to revealing the gentleness of the heart of Jesus. Chapter 6. Sacrifice behind the convent walls. Entering religious life did not erase Jane's maternal love. Leaving her children was among the most painful sacrifices she ever made. She trusted that they were old enough to continue their lives, yet separation remained a hidden wound. Their needs, struggles, and choices followed her into the silence of the convent. Her decision was misunderstood by some relatives and observers. They questioned how a mother could enter religious life while her children were still living. Jane herself felt the conflict deeply. She did not abandon her family, but entrusted them to God while continuing to guide them through letters, counsel, and prayer. The new order also encountered resistance. Some church leaders believed that religious women should remain strictly enclosed rather than visit the sick. As a result, the Visitation gradually became a cloistered contemplative order. Jane accepted this change obediently, even though it altered part of the original plan she had shared with Francis. Financial pressures accompanied every new foundation. Houses needed food, suitable buildings, and stable leadership. Jane frequently faced debts, misunderstandings, and difficult negotiations. She carried these concerns to prayer, reminding her sisters that prudence was necessary, but fear must never overcome confidence in God. Critics also considered the Visitation too gentle. They doubted whether holiness could flourish without harsh penances and severe discipline. Jane responded through the quiet faithfulness of the sisters. Their charity, obedience, sacrifice, and perseverance demonstrated that gentleness was not weakness, but a demanding form of spiritual strength. Jane herself endured long periods of interior darkness. The consolations she had once experienced in prayer often disappeared. She sometimes felt distant from God, yet continued to pray and serve without relying on emotion. Her fidelity became purer because it rested on faith rather than spiritual comfort. Through exterior burdens and interior trials, she learned to surrender everything. The Visitation was not her personal possession. Her family was not beyond suffering, and prayer did not always bring immediate peace. Yet Jane remained faithful, convinced that God was present even when his providence could not be clearly seen. Chapter 7. The Death of Francis de Sales. In December 1622, Jane received the news she had long feared. Francis de Sales died in Lyon after years of exhausting pastoral service. He had been her bishop, spiritual father, closest collaborator, and trusted friend. His death left Jane facing both profound personal grief and responsibility for the future of the Visitation. Once again, death had taken someone at the center of her life. She had lost her mother, husband, and children, and now the guide who had helped her understand God's call. Yet the lessons Francis had taught her became the very means by which she endured his absence. Jane brought her sorrow before the Blessed Sacrament. She did not deny the pain or pretend that faith made separation easy. Instead, she placed the friendship, the order, and the unfinished work into God's hands. Her grief became another offering, purified through prayer and obedience. With Francis gone, many looked to Jane for stability. She guarded his spiritual teaching and ensured that the Visitation remained faithful to its founding charism. She resisted efforts that might distort its gentleness or burden the sisters with unnecessary practices that Francis had never intended. Jane traveled among the convents whenever possible. Her journeys were physically demanding and often uncomfortable, but she considered personal presence essential. She listened to superiors, encouraged struggling sisters, resolved conflicts, and strengthened unity among communities separated by great distances. When she could not travel, she wrote, her letters combined spiritual insight with practical wisdom, addressing prayer, leadership, illness, discouragement, and community tensions. Through them, Jane extended her maternal care across France, giving each house a sense of belonging to one spiritual family. Francis was no longer beside her, but the mission continued. Jane understood that the Visitation belonged to God before it belonged to either of its founders. Her fidelity after Francis's death revealed that she was not merely his disciple. She had become a wise and courageous leader in her own right. Chapter 8. A spiritual family spreads across France. Under Jane's leadership, the Visitation expanded rapidly. New monasteries appeared in Lyon, Grenoble, Paris, Moulins, and many other cities. By the time of her death, 87 houses had been founded. What began in a modest home in Annecy had become one of the most remarkable religious movements of 17th century France. Growth brought both joy and danger. Jane feared that rapid expansion might weaken the original spirit of the order. She therefore chose superiors carefully, examined new foundations, and insisted that every community remain rooted in humility, simplicity, prayer, and mutual charity rather than prestige or wealth. She devoted particular attention to forming leaders. A superior, she taught, must not govern through fear or personal preference. She should listen carefully, correct with charity, and recognize the different needs of each sister. Authority was a service entrusted by God, not an opportunity to control others. Jane's correspondence became essential to preserving unity. She wrote thousands of letters to sisters, bishops, benefactors, relatives, and spiritual friends. Her words could be tender, direct, humorous, or firm, but they consistently led others toward peace, obedience, and trust in God. Bishops and priests increasingly sought her counsel. Though she never claimed authority beyond her vocation, her experience and discernment were widely respected. She understood human weakness without excusing sin and encouraged spiritual growth without crushing those who struggled. Her wisdom came from suffering transformed by prayer. Visitation monasteries became places of quiet spiritual influence. Behind their walls, the sisters prayed for the church and the world. Lay people came seeking counsel, consolation, and renewed faith. The hidden life of the communities touched countless souls who would never know the sacrifices sustaining them. Jane witnessed the seed planted with Francis become a flourishing tree, yet she took little credit for its success. She repeatedly reminded the sisters that the order belonged to God. Their task was not to seek admiration, but to remain small, faithful, and receptive to the movements of Divine Providence. Chapter 9. A mother purified by sorrow. Even as the Visitation flourished, Jane continued to endure personal suffering. Several of her children died before her, and each loss reopened the wound of maternal grief. Religious consecration had not made her less human. She mourned deeply, but carried each sorrow into the presence of Christ. Her son, Cels Benigne, died in battle in 1627, leaving behind a wife and young daughter. That daughter, Marie de Raboutin Chantal, would later become the celebrated writer Madame de Sévigné. Jane grieved for her son, while also offering support and prayer for the family he left behind. Other family losses followed. Her daughter Marie-Aimée died after childbirth, and Jane witnessed sorrow enter the next generation. She could not shield those she loved from illness, death, or difficult choices. Motherhood taught her again and again that love must eventually surrender what it cannot control. Jane also suffered from recurring illness and physical exhaustion. Decades of travel, leadership, and emotional strain weakened her body. Nevertheless, she continued visiting foundations and responding to the needs of the sisters whenever possible. Her strength came less from health than from fidelity to the mission entrusted to her. France remained troubled by political conflict, religious tension, and war. Jane urged her communities not to become consumed by fear or factional disputes. Their response to a wounded world was to remain steadfast in prayer, charity, and peace, while offering assistance whenever circumstances allowed. Her spirituality did not glorify suffering for its own sake. She believed that crosses became fruitful when united with Christ and received in love. Pain could embitter the heart, but surrendered pain could enlarge it. Her own compassion grew because she knew what it meant to lose those she loved. By the final years of her life, Jane had been stripped of nearly every earthly security. Yet she had not become cold or withdrawn. Her heart had grown more maternal, patient, and merciful. Through repeated loss, God had formed within her a love capable of embracing an entire spiritual family. Chapter 10. Her final journey. In 1641, despite declining health, Jane continued visiting houses of the Visitation. She knew that her strength was fading, yet her concern remained fixed on the sisters and the unity of the order. Her final travels became a last expression of the maternal service that had defined more than 30 years of religious life. While staying at the Visitation Monastery in Moulins, she became seriously ill. The sisters gathered around their foundress, aware that the woman who had guided them through so many trials was approaching death. Jane received the sacraments and prepared herself calmly for the final surrender. Her last days were marked by weakness, but also by trust. She had experienced spiritual darkness for many years, and death did not suddenly remove every struggle. Yet she remained faithful without demanding consolation. The God she had trusted in sorrow would also receive her at the end of her journey. On the 13th of December 1641, Jane Frances de Chantal died at the age of 69. Her passing brought profound grief to the sisters. They had lost not only their foundress, but the spiritual mother whose courage, tenderness, and wisdom had formed the identity of the Visitation. News of her death spread quickly through France. Religious communities, clergy, nobles, and ordinary believers remembered her charity and counsel. Many had witnessed how she transformed personal suffering into service, and her gentleness gave strength to those burdened by fear, illness, or grief. Her body was taken to Annecy and laid to rest near Francis de Sales. The two friends who had founded the Visitation were reunited in the place where their shared mission had begun. Their earthly work was complete, but the communities they formed continued to grow. Jane left no grand monument built for her own glory. Her true legacy lived in the sisters, letters, monasteries, and souls shaped by her example. She had shown that surrender is not passive resignation, but a courageous decision to love God faithfully through every changing season of life. Chapter 11. Canonization and an enduring legacy. After Jane's death, devotion to her spread among the Visitation sisters and the faithful. Those who had known her remembered a woman of deep prayer, practical wisdom, and extraordinary endurance. Her reputation for holiness rested not on dramatic visions, but on decades of faithful love amid suffering and responsibility. Accounts of favors and healings attributed to her intercession were gathered and examined. The Church also studied her writings, virtues, and the testimony of those who had lived beside her. Her life revealed heroic faith as a daughter, wife, mother, widow, religious sister, and foundress. Pope Benedict XIV beatified Jane Frances de Chantal in 1751. The celebration brought great joy to the Order of the Visitation, which had spread beyond France. The Church now formally presented her as a model for Christians seeking holiness through ordinary duties, sacrifice, and trust in providence. On the 16th of July 1767, Pope Clement XIII canonized her. The young widow who had once struggled to forgive and wondered how to continue living after tragedy was now numbered among the saints. Her wounds had not prevented holiness. Through grace, they had become part of her path toward it. Saint Jane Frances remains a powerful patron for widows, mothers, those who have lost children, and people struggling with difficult family circumstances. Her life assures them that grief does not mean abandonment by God. and that a broken future can still become a holy vocation. Her spiritual legacy continues in the order of the Visitation. The sisters preserve the charism she shared with St. Francis de Sales: gentleness, humility, simplicity, and devotion to the heart of Christ. Centuries later, their hidden prayer remains a quiet source of grace within the Church. The Church celebrates her feast on August 12. Her story invites every believer to discover holiness within the life already given to them. Whether in family joy, bereavement, illness, leadership, or hidden service, God remains present, patiently transforming faithful love into eternal glory. Chapter 12. Prayer to Saint Jane Frances de Chantal. O gentle Saint Jane Frances de Chantal, we thank God for the witness of your holy life. As a faithful wife, devoted mother, courageous widow, and foundress of the Visitation Order, you showed that every vocation can become a path to sanctity. Pray that we may trust God completely and follow Him with generous hearts. Saint Jane Frances, intercede especially for mothers and families. You understood the joys, fears, and sacrifices of raising children in faith. Obtain for every parent wisdom, patience, and tenderness. May our homes become places where Christ is welcomed, His word is honored, and His merciful love is shared. Remember all who grieve the death of someone they love. You knew the loneliness of widowhood and the anguish of losing children, yet you remained faithful to divine providence. Pray that sorrowing hearts may receive comfort, strength for each day, and hope in the promise of eternal life. Pray also for all women consecrated to Christ, especially the sisters of the Visitation Order. May they remain faithful to their vows and grow in humility, gentleness, and charity. Through their prayer and hidden sacrifices, may many souls encounter the peace and mercy of the heart of Jesus. Dear Saint Jane Frances, obtain for us humility, patience, and surrender to God's will. Teach us that holiness is found not only in extraordinary deeds, but in quiet faithfulness to ordinary duties. Help us receive every person, trial, and responsibility as an opportunity to love Christ more deeply. Strengthen us in the vocation God has entrusted to each of us. When difficulties arise, preserve us from discouragement. When the future seems uncertain, renew our confidence in divine providence. May every cross accepted with faith draw us closer to Jesus and make our hearts more compassionate toward others. Saint Jane Frances de Chantal, place our needs before our loving Father. Lead us into deeper friendship with Christ and greater trust in His grace. May your example inspire us to persevere faithfully until our earthly journey ends and we rejoice with you forever in the peace of God's kingdom. Amen.